Thanks for checking out this fellowship message video. We pray it encourages you and draws you closer to Jesus. Also, don't forget to follow us online at @formacalm or at fellowshipchapel.net. It's the best way to stay connected to the life of the church.
You may be seated. My name is Robert, and I have the joy of being the lead pastor here at Fellowship. And I'm excited because today is the second day of a new month. I have no skin in the game for the Super Bowl, so whoever you're rooting for, enjoy the commercials. But what I'm excited about is a couple new things. One, we're starting a new series. And if you're worried about this whole series, relationship goals, you can step back a little bit. It's for all of us. We'll get into that. But the other thing I'm excited about is new Bibles. So in the chairs around you, if you actually look underneath, you are going to find a new Bible in there. And this, just a shout out, they know who they are, but there were a couple families that saw that on the screen I kept using NLT. And they asked, what prevents you from not having it on the screen? I said, well, it's not the Bibles we have, so I have to kind of shift between the two. And so we decided as a church to switch over to NLTs, and a couple families decided to donate all new chair Bibles to make that possible. So I'm excited. We tried to get as large a print as we could because I know the Bible can be hard to read, but the white pages make a world of a difference, I hope. We always say you can take these and give them away. Not these ones, please. So as much as I'd love to say that, we are getting some awesome NLT study Bibles that are going to be coming in, that if you know someone who could use a Bible, if you would like a Bible, this actually only has so much to it. The study Bible will help you a whole lot more. And so that's why we're waiting until those come in, and we'll have Bibles to still give away. That's not changing. But if you want to even open the fresh Bibles, we're actually going to be in 1 Samuel chapter 16 today, and we're going to be journeying through this book of Samuel. But before we actually get there, I'm going to give you kind of a setup of this whole series. And the goal of this series, Relationship Goals, is to help us grow in our relationships, both with God and the people around us. And I know that when you think of relationship goals, especially with Valentine's Day coming up, you're immediately thinking of dating relationships. You're thinking of spousal relationships. But while that can be a focus of it, we're looking at relationships across the board. We know that we all have different various relationships that we're a part of. And so some, yes, you're going to be able to apply that into your marriage, I hope and pray. Others, you're going to be able to put that into your friendships, into your family relationships, into your relationships with people that you're on a team with or in school with or wherever it might be. You're going to be able to hopefully apply these relationship things to those relationships. And so I don't want you to be thinking, well, I'm not married, so does this apply to me? Yes, it applies to you. Well, I'm married. Does this apply to me? Yes, it applies to you. And I pray that this series is going to help us as we journey through it. And what I really, as we were putting this series together, God just was laying it on my heart over and over and over again to focus on King David. Now, if you know a little bit of the background of King David, he is not your relationship expert. I'll put it that way. In fact, we know he had at minimum, because there's a passage that says, and many more wives, he had at least 8 wives. Just think about that, men, for a second. 8 wives. He had minimum 8 wives. He definitely had some oopsies. In fact, he had an affair with someone named Bathsheba. And as he had that affair, she got pregnant. In order to cover it all up, what does David do? He actually murdered a man. So we have this interesting person in the Bible, David, who's the second king of Israel. And we're going to look to his life for relationship guidance. Just think about that for a second. But God did some things, and he showed us different things that we can definitely take out of his life in the interactions he had with other people that will be able to provide us some insight into how we can then apply that to our lives. Because here's the thing. It's less about David having been a perfect example and more about examining how God worked in and through his relationships. Because here's the reality. I don't have a perfect relationship. I'm not going to stand up here and say, I got it all together. My wife, she has it all together. But there's a two-person equation in that, right? And I'm one of them, and I can't stand up here and say, you know what, I got it all together, I'm doing it just right. And there's no one that we can find in the Bible and their relationships who they were doing it all right. Jesus was the only perfect person. And so we see his relationships with his disciples and such as that. But for us to think that because David's imperfections, we can't learn from it, I think we'd be a little bit naive to think that we couldn't. So we're going to open to 1 Samuel chapter 16. And we have 1 and 2 Samuel really tell us a lot about the life of David. David is actually a pretty big name in the Bible. David's born from a father named Jesse in the town of, can anyone say it? Bethlehem. Well, who else was born in Bethlehem? Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Christmas, we celebrate the little manger and that whole scene. And so David, King David, is the lineage that we follow that gives us who? Jesus. Why did Joseph have to take Mary all the way to Bethlehem? You can blame family history and probably land or things that were inherited. That's why he had to go there and take the census. And so there a lot points back to David. He is a big figure in the Bible. While not perfect, he's a big figure. And in 1 and 2 Samuel, we get a good glimpse into his life. Now, a little more background before I start reading 1 Samuel 16 is that this is in the time of judges and then kings. So Samuel is the last judge of Israel. A judge would basically help guide and rule over God's people, Israel. And then all of a sudden the people clamored for a king. They said, we want a king. We want someone to lead us as a king. All the other nations have kings. That's what we want. We want a king. So Samuel appoints a king, anoints a king, and he anoints the first king of Israel, and his name is Saul. So he anoints Saul as king. Saul becomes king, and then that brings us into this situation now. There's Samuel, the book's name is after. He's still alive as judge. It's like that transition period. And then you have Saul as king. That's the context that we're working within. And so let's begin in 1 Samuel chapter 16, and we'll follow for a few verses. Now the Lord said to Samuel, you have mourned long enough for Saul. I have rejected him as king of Israel. So the key thing here is Saul, power got to him a little bit. And he no longer was walking in the ways of God, but he was walking in the ways of himself. And so God removed his hand from him, and he said, well, you're not fit to be king really anymore. And so he's been rejected as king, and Samuel, I'm sure, is disappointed about this because he was the one who anointed him the first king afterward. After all, right? So he's probably sitting there like, all right, what's going on, God? So I want you to fill your flask with olive oil and go to Bethlehem. I want you to find a man named Jesse who lives there, for I have selected one of his sons to be my king. But Samuel asked, how can I do that? If Saul hears about it, he will kill me. Just think why he would kill him. He's going to go anoint another king while Saul is sitting as king. He's kind of a little nervous. Take a heifer with you, the Lord replied. This is basically saying, take some type of oxen with you. That's how you could interpret that, is some type of oxen. So this could be like some type of cattle, probably some type of bison. Take it with you and say that you have come to make a sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you which son to anoint for me. So he said, look, we'll go under this disguise. You take some type of oxen with you. As we take it with you, go find Jesse in a town called Bethlehem. Have him gather his family together, and I'm going to show you who the next king is going to be. So Samuel did as the Lord instructed. I could just stop there, and that's a sermon right there. Do as the Lord instructed. All right, side note. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town came trembling to meet him. Could you imagine the judge of Israel just stepped in your town? They're a little bit nervous. What's wrong, they asked. Do you come in peace? Yes, Samuel replied. I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Purify yourselves and come with me to the sacrifice. Then Samuel performed the purification rite for Jesse and his sons and invited them into the sacrifice too. When they arrived, Samuel took one look at Elam and thought, surely this is the Lord's anointed. I need to stop there for a second. We have Jesse and all of the sons of Jesse, so it appears, are purified and brought. So what is before him here are the sons of Jesse. And there's Samuel. And he's going to find out who God has. But the Lord said so then naturally Samuel sees the oldest, Eliab, and he says, it must be this person. But the Lord said to Samuel, don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. I need to stop right there for a second. Catch this. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. We're going to continue a little bit, but I want to just pause right there for a second. To be more like God, we should probably look at things more like how God looks at things. Now, that doesn't mean go to someone you're in a relationship with and take an x-ray machine out and say, all right, I got to take a good hard look at your heart. But what it does mean is it means to look maybe on the inside. What is truly there of them as a person. Maybe you've heard this said. I heard this all growing up. Don't just fall in love with the outside, but it's what's inside a person that really matters. And you probably heard that and were told that and didn't really want to care about that. In fact, when I was growing up, I can tell you I was told that over and over, but I applied it to me. Like if they only knew my inside, like if they stopped looking at my outside as I'm awkwardly growing and going through these phases in my life, if they only just knew my inside, then the girls would really like me. And it never seemed to work out that way. And so as we were going through life, it was like going through that time, it was just a struggle, right? Why wouldn't they? And so eventually, God helped me grow up a little bit. And as I did, I began doing something called dating. Maybe you've heard of the word. And the interesting thing with dating is I was studying the history of this. And did you know that dating actually didn't begin until after the 1900s. I want you to think about that for a second. We're in 2020. So only 120 years ago did the whole idea of dating even start to take place. And what is the whole heartbeat of dating? It's really striving to get to know more and more who that person is. And so you go, first in today's culture, you swipe left, right? And then you're like, oh, all right, I think they, on the outside, their pictures, they look great, so I'm going to swipe left. I was trying to do that for Nate the other day, and nothing worked for him, so I keep praying. That's my shout out. And so as you do that, you see the outward appearance, and I think Nate, he has a great heart and a great outside. So that sounds really awkward. Anyways, you get my heart behind it. Nate will understand. I'm trying to not bat. Yeah, my wife's cutting me off. So, anyways, as you look on the outward, but what do? You begin to go on dates with them, and you begin to get to know them more, and then you make a choice. Do I like them or do I not like them? Are we going to work together or are we not going to work together? And we're really, 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 really picky. Have you ever noticed that? We're really picky. The way dating was before that is two dads would get together and they'd say, hey, is your daughter available? Yep. Is your son available? Yep. And then they line up maybe 3 girls for a guy to pick, and they got to pick one of the 3. The dads agreed, and that's how families began. Kind of interesting. And now we have this world where we're really picky, really selective. But have you ever noticed that as we get in a relationship with people, as the relationship begins to grow, we get less and less picky about things? And instead of actually getting to know them, wanting to know their heart, wanting to hear them out, wanting to actually know what they're all about, we quickly begin jumping more to the outward appearance of what they're doing rather than the inward heart of why they're doing it. My wife might have a concern about something. And she'll come to me with this concern, and as a male, I want to so quickly fix it. And I have about 10 answers right off the bat of how that problem can be solved. And I can tell you something, not one of those 10 answers is what she was actually looking for. All she really wanted me to know was her heart behind what was bothering her, not the solution to the problem. But how often does that happen in our relationships, day in and day out? Oftentimes, maybe it's even with a boss or something. They come to us and we have a problem, or there's a problem to solve, and we have all the answers, but we don't actually get to the heart of what really is the problem. We begin to get really quick to answer. We get really quick to have our decisions be made. We're very much like Samuel. The first son that's presented, it must be him. But do we ever take a step back for a second? Do we take a moment to actually just take it in? To actually examine the situation? Let's continue in our passage. Then Jesse told his son Abinadab to step forward and walk in front of Samuel. But Samuel said, this is not the one the Lord has chosen. Next, Jesse summoned Shema. But Samuel said, neither is this the one the Lord has chosen. In the same way, all 7 of Jesse's sons were presented to Samuel. But Samuel said to Jesse, the Lord has not chosen any of these. Picture this. All 7 sons were presented to Samuel. Every single son that was there at the sacrifice was presented. It's like, here they all are. Why aren't you choosing them? It goes on. Then Samuel asked, are these all the sons you have? They're still the youngest, Jesse replied, but he's out in the fields watching the sheep and goats. Send for him at once, Samuel said. We will not sit down and eat until he arrives. I want you to capture something here. The son that we're about to see come was never the one originally even at the sacrifice. He never went through the purification rites with the family. He never did any of it. He was just left out in the field. And as we're going to look at how often in our lives have we felt like the one just left out in the field all alone while everyone else is gathered in that group. So Jesse sent for him. He was dark and handsome with beautiful eyes. And the Lord said, this is the one. Anoint him. So as David stood there among his brothers, Samuel took the flask of olive oil he had brought and anointed David with the oil. And the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon David from that day on. Then Samuel returned to Ramah. See, David was the least expected answer, especially from the eyes of Jesse, his father. One, he was the youngest. And blessing in that culture always was supposed to go through the oldest son. He was also not even at the gathering. He wasn't even a thought in Jesse's mind because he didn't even bring him to the gathering. He was simply a shepherd boy taking care of the sheep. But this is what's important for us to know. So often in our problems, we jump to the first conclusion. We jump to what's right in front of our face. But to get to the heart of the matter, God doesn't just look at what's right in front of them, but he looks for the best option, what truly could really be what his will is. And so what does he do? He takes a look at the heart. And what ends up happening when God takes a look at the heart? He finds David. And David is the one that is anointed. And everyone is probably shocked by that. So here's our relationship goal that we're going to dig into today. Here it is. Relationship goal 1, we'll have them each week, is look at the heart. So easily we can look for the quick fix to a solution without understanding the heart of what really needs to be done. When we're dating or when we're setting out to date, here's a couple thoughts. Don't just settle for what's available. What if we're so quick to make an option? Well, you know what? That person likes me. They must be the one. Well, maybe that's not truly God's heart for you. Don't just brush off your spouse's concerns. Maybe it seems little to you, but it's big to them. Get to know what is actually happening. Get to know the real issue that is at hand. And how do we do this? How do we actually figure out, how do we get to the heart of the matter? It's what Jesus showed us so well. It's what he did over and over again. And it's what we're going to see David did as well. Here it is. Here's the solution to so many conflicts. Are you ready for it? Ask clarifying questions. This is something I need to learn so often because I can be so quick to have a statement in various things. But it's when I actually take a step back, I think for a second, and I actually ask for a clarifying question that we begin to actually get to the heart of what really is going on. We see this happen with David. I want to jump to chapter 17, and we're going to examine a famous story, and now it's going to be interesting because we're going to see it through the lens of what was happening with relationships. So remember, David, his dad wasn't even thinking about him. So think about that. He's just like son just out in the field taking care of the sheep and the goats. And David is the same David that kills Goliath. I'm giving you the whole story that we're about to see. And so we're jumping into that in chapter 17. But start with me on verse 17. One day Jesse said to David, "Take this basket of roasted grain and these 10 loaves of bread and carry them quickly to your brothers and give these 10 cuts of cheese to their captain. See how your brothers are getting along and bring back a report on how they're doing." David's brothers were with Saul in the Israelite army at the valley of Elah fighting against the Philistines. His brothers are at war. The dad said, "Hey, Jesse, go take them some food, come back and give me a report about how they're doing." So David left the sheep with another shepherd and sent out in the early next morning with the gifts, as Jesse had directed. He arrived at the camp just as the Israelite army was leaving the battlefield with shouts of battle cries. Soon the Israelite and Philistine forces stood facing each other, army against army. Can you picture it? There's two armies coming together. David left his things with the keeper of the supplies and hurried out to the ranks to greet his brothers. So he gives them the supplies and he goes out to the battlefield to see his brothers. And as he was talking with them, Goliath, the Philistine champion from Gath, came out from the Philistine ranks. Then David heard him shout with a usual taunt to the army of Israel. As soon as the Israelite army saw him, they began to run away in fright. This big man, and as we study it, it's actually really interesting. He only stood about 6'10", so that was big to them. But like we have 6'10". I had a 6'10" roommate in college. That was Goliath. And so Goliath, standing about 6'10", a big old center on a basketball team, shouts with a loud cry, and they freak out, and they're worried because there's this battle happening, because they ran. And so what happens? Have you seen the giant, the men asked? He comes out here to defy Israel. The king has offered a huge reward to anyone who kills him. He will give that man one of his daughters for a wife, and the man's entire family will be exempted from paying taxes. David asked the soldier standing nearby, "What will a man get for killing this Philistine and ending his defiance of Israel?" Who is this pagan Philistine anyway, that he is allowed to defy the armies of the living God? He's not making a statement, he's just asking some questions. So what is it that happens if someone takes him down? And who is this guy? We have a living God. Why would he even defy him? And these men gave David the same reply. They say, yes, this is the reward for killing him. So David's oldest brother, Eliab, steps in. He hears David talking to the men. And what is he? He's angry. David, why are you talking to these men? What are you doing around here anyway? He demanded. He didn't ask, he demanded. Why are you here? What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? And catch this, here's the statement. Are you ready about it? Here it is on the screen. I know your pride and deceit. You just want to see the battle. What does Eliab do immediately? He jumps to a conclusion of why David was there in the first place. Why was David there? His dad asked him to deliver bread and supplies and to bring back a report. He was doing as his father had asked. It wasn't about his pride. It wasn't about him trying to get something or gain something. He's asking questions that are trying to clarify the situation so that he can even understand why they're freaking out in the first place. And his brother jumps to a conclusion and he says, you're all about yourself. How often does that happen in our relationships? We don't know the whole story, but yet we just jump to a conclusion. Here's something that we can take away, is our situations are never going to change until we actually do something to change them. The Philistines and the Israelites are sitting there and they're at a stalemate. And nothing is going to change until they do something to change them. The same is in our relationships. Oftentimes we feel like we're at a stalemate and nothing is going to change until we do something to change them. You may be in a relationship struggle that feels so overwhelming, like there's a giant in your way. You may feel single, and the thought that's probably in your mind is that there's no one for me. You may feel stuck, and you're thinking, this is not what I thought this relationship would be like. You may face struggle, and the situation may seem impossible to overcome. Are we ever going to be able to make it through this? My challenge is, have you gotten to the heart yet? What questions have you been asking? Because let's continue with what happens with David. What have I done now? David replied. I was only asking a question. He walked over to some others and asked them the same thing and received the same answer. Then David's questions, catch this, verse 31. Then David's question was reported to King Saul, and the king sought for him. Why did King Saul send for David? Because David asked questions. He never said, I demand to go see Saul. He asked questions. So then we get into this next part of relationship. Ask clarifying questions. You can do that. And then here's the other part of it. We're going to see what Saul had to learn. Actually listen to what the other person has to say. Ask a question and listen. And James, Jesus' brother, literally wrote this: you must all be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to be angry. Look at what happens here as we start in verse 32. Don't worry about this Philistine, David told Saul. I'll go fight him. He has his confidence in God now. He's before the king and he says, I'll do it. And so what does Saul say? Don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine and possibly win. You're only a boy and he's been a man of war since his youth. Do you see what Saul did? Did he ask him a question? No, he jumped to a conclusion. He said, nope, you're not going to be able to do it, period. You're just a boy. This is a warrior. No way, no how. But David persisted. It's like he's saying, but you don't know my heart, Saul. You don't know why I'm really saying that. I've been taking care of my father's sheep and goats, he said. When a lion and a bear comes and steals a lamb from the flock, I go after it with a club and rescue the lamb from its mouth. If the animal turns on me, I catch it by the jaw and club it to death. I have done this to both lions and bears, and I'll do it again to this pagan Philistine too. For he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the claws of the lion and the bear will rescue me from this Palestine. He tells Saul, look, my heart is all about the Lord. The Lord's rescued me from these other situations. He's going to rescue me through this one because it's his people. And so Saul first says, you're ridiculous. What does he say next? Here it is. He consented. All right, go ahead. May the Lord be with you. And Saul gave David his armor, a bronze helmet, and a coat of mail. David put it on, strapped the sword over it, and took a step or two to see what it like, and it was never been worn before. And he says, I can't go in these. They're too heavy. So after he hears his heart, what happens? Saul goes from jumping to a conclusion to basically saying, here's my armor. Go and fight. Something changes once he actually heard his heart. The same happens in our relationships. Something changes once we hear the other person's heart. Did you know that in a conversation, we actually take it takes about 3 seconds to process what someone else said. So whatever I said to you just now, go 1, 2, 3. And that's how long it takes you to process what I just said. Each statement that we take in a conversation lasts about 2 seconds. So do the math. 3 seconds to comprehend. We talk for 2 seconds. And there's a 200 millisecond separation between each statement. It's basically like we talk back and forth, but never leave time to process. How often do we do that in our conversations? We might ask questions, we might try to listen, but do we really take the time? No, often we're talking over one another. So to get to the heart of the matter, first, you got to ask some clarifying questions. Well, what do you mean by that? Really, why is this the problem? Can you explain it to me? What are you looking for me to help you with? These are clarifying questions. And then take time to listen and actually take it in and saying what they're saying. And then whatever battle you're facing, whether it's in your relationship battle, at home, in your life, here's the key that I'll always come back to. Let the Lord fight for you. So often we want to put on our boxing gloves and go at it, as if we have anything to bring. But if truly we're to get to the heart of the matter, we got to let God get to the heart of the matter. I'll sum it up with what Samuel says to Goliath. It's verse 45. You come to me with sword, spear, and javelin, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of heaven's army, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. Like I said in the beginning, I'm not the expert in relationship, but I can tell you there's times where I feel I do get it right. And I'll tell you what the secret is. Are you ready for the big secret? I listen. I ask questions. And I pause. And I seek God. I actually say, God, what would you have me do? And there's times where I just feel, shut your mouth. Don't say anything. There's times where I feel, maybe show a little more compassion. And as I actually try to say, God, what do you think I should do? This is what it miraculously does. It actually makes me pause to think about what's actually going on in the conversation. Because so often our relationships can spiral so quickly because we actually never take a step out of the situation. As we begin to rest more and more in this, and here's the challenge, as we begin to take the time to actually understand a person's heart, we begin to actually see God working and moving in our relationships in a new and fresh way. In your bulletin as you came in was a psalm. And what I want to challenge us to do each week is read and reflect on a psalm each week. And so David wrote many of these psalms. There's a book in the Bible called Psalms who were written by King David. And I think so often we just see them as, oh, they're in the Bible, we got to read this psalm. But as the music group comes out, we're going to actually read this psalm together. And I want you to pray over this psalm. I want you to reflect on this psalm throughout your week, because I want you to think of David. He was rejected by his own father. His father left him in the field and brought his 7 other brothers to Samuel, but not David. Imagine the baggage he carried, thinking, yeah, I was the last one. His brothers didn't really look favorably upon him. Look at what happens when he interacts with Eliab. He says, look, you're just all about yourself. And throughout David's life, he had to actually get to the heart of it, and that was that he needed God. And so here's a psalm that I think is powerful for us to reflect on and to pray over, because maybe you felt rejected or forgotten. And this is for you. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need. He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, bringing honor to His name. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff protect and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. You honor me by anointing my head with oil, and my cup overflows with blessings. He points back to that moment. That moment when his dad brought up, I have one more option. And he remembers that anointing he had with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. As we receive communion in a moment, I want you to receive it knowing that there's a God who is with you in your relationship struggle, whatever that is. If you're feeling lonely, He's with you. If you're feeling like there's strife and conflict, He's with you. If you feel like you have no answer, He's with you. Wherever you are in your life, know this, that there is a God who is with you. And that's why Jesus came. That's why He gave of Himself. That's why He went on the cross. That's why we celebrate communion, because God, came to be with us and made a way so that we could have a relationship with Him. So as we break off of the bread and we dip it in the juice, would you be reminded that God loved you so much that He sacrificed everything for you? Can you pray with me? God, we thank You for being in our story, for coming to us and to loving us as much as You did. God, thank You for giving of Yourself so that we may have joy, we may have hope. God, we love You. We thank You. And where we're feeling hurt or rejected, God, would You fill that void as we know that You're the only true Father that we can rely on. In Your holy name we pray.